Hearty welcome to all who are guests today, visitors, some by an invitation of a family or friend. Glad to have you visiting with us today. Hope you'll come back tonight at 5 p.m. And let me put a plug in already for Friends and Family Day next Sunday. Looking forward to having David live with us. He'll do a great job. You'll be blessed by his lessons. Encourage you to be part of every one of those services. We'll have our combined adult classes, 9 p.m. That'll be, or 9 a.m. rather, in here. Our morning worship, bring plenty of food, be considerate of our guests, even parking maybe further away than you usually do, welcoming any face that's not familiar to you. Let's have a great meal together around 12:30, depending on how much we eat and how many we have here. We'll have our evening service at that time. There'll be no 5 p.m. service next Sunday night. So I'm looking forward to that. Many of you are planning and preparing, have issued invitations already. Let's keep those coming through this week. There are some outlines on the back table of today's lessons. Many of you have gotten out of the habit of doing those. Might have found one. Don't go get one now, but for tonight you can find the back side. I'm so excited about tonight's lesson. I'd be tempted to preach both of them this morning, except I'm afraid I'd get hungry, and you would too before I got finished. But tonight, Overwhelming Victory. Don't you love that title? A sentiment from Romans chapter 8. Be reading verses 28 through the end of the chapter. You'll see where we're going with that. Just a reminder that in days when we feel defeated, in times when it seems like God and His people have lost the upper hand, we need to be reminded of some precious promises. So study along with us tonight as we come together. We're looking at a lesson. In fact, this was hard to get on one line of the marquee out there. You might have noticed that the letters were all jumbled together, but disrespecting authority. I want you to know on the front end that I'm not advocating disrespect of authority, but simply referring to the fact that it exists. And looking at some of the causes of that and how we cure that, how we get away from disrespect and then hopefully, prayerfully get back to respect of God and His Word. I'm glad I'm not using this monitor tonight because I can't see what is up here. If you thought, well, why is Caleb looking that way? Well, because this monitor is not working. This little cartoon clip, I thought, illustrated the idea of authority and maybe our ambivalence to it. We like it, and yet we don't like it. We may have a love-hate relationship. I like to have authority and for you to respect my authority and you to cater to me, but I don't so much like others or want them to be in that position. We live in a day and age in which people have all kind of feelings and maybe some misguided feelings about authority that I want us to get into. Socrates had a quote, I'm not going to read it there, about youth in his day. And by the way, he lived way back in, the 400s or so BC. Socrates, and I've also seen a similar quote attributed to Plato, his disciple or his student. I'm not sure. I'm going to assume that he was the one that talked about, if you think about it, 2,500 years ago, there was a problem with respect of authority, and he kind of singled out the younger generation. I guess maybe every generation has looked upon them with disfavor or disdain occasionally, and what he said wasn't universally true then. I'm sure it's not universally true now today. We have a lot of people that wrestle with where the authority is and how to look at it. You know, it's kind of crazy when a person says, I don't think that authority exists. There is no authority. Don't worry about that. You know, if you say something like that, basically you have asserted yourself as the authority in saying, I am issuing an authoritative proclamation, and that is there's no authority. You actually violated and set on its head the very argument that you're making there. We live in a world of anarchy that basically says, oh, there is no authority, and we need to chip away or maybe more aggressively attack anyone or anything that asserts itself as an authority. And if they succeed in that, and that anarchy is in a way an authority in and of itself, it is the void of authority that is really leveling society, rendering it null and void, and causing it to fall in upon itself. That is a terrible state of affairs. Today we're reminding that God is the ultimate authority, and He always has been. Friends, He always will be. Yes, there is authority. Why? Because there is a God, and God has always been, and forever shall exist. God cannot be voted out. He has never been overcome. There will never be a day in which he is obsolete or loses his power. Rejoice in the notion that God is the ultimate authority, and that authority emanates from him. Anybody who has tried to tread on the authority of God or to overthrow him has failed dismally in the attempt. It can't happen. Friends, it won't work. And today I must respect his authority, and I must respect those things that he's given as an example of authority. I want to do this. In looking at some ways in which authority is being undermined, people are trying to act as if there is no authority. Would you explore a few of those with me? I would say, number one, it's discernible when you look at law enforcement, and many today who are blatantly thumbing their nose at anyone and everyone, and the very notion of someone being in charge of others. Romans 13 that we had read a moment ago, coming back to a little bit later, says that these come from God. God doesn't lose any of his authority in giving if you will, a kind of a delegated authority to others, including his civil servants. And today when we have people disrespecting to the degree that in cold blood they would murder someone who is a peace officer is beyond me. We see people who are lobbying for parents losing their authority. In fact, some are deciding, you know what, parents are an afterthought. Our school systems and our elected officials and other social structures will take over your job for you. We'll decide best for your children. Sometimes that disrespect for authority is from the children to the parents who stand idly by and act as if, well, I did my best. They just don't listen to me. They won't follow my leadership here in this home. Did you watch the footage? I did with horror this past week at a high school football game, actually a week ago from this past Friday. Two defensive backs target and spear a referee who is facing the play. They run it in full steam, knock him down. First one does, the other piles on in full steam right there. And yes, we're up in arms about that. We should be. And about the assistant coach who may have had a part in doing that. That can't continue to exist without some kind of pushback and people saying, wait a minute. How did we get to the point where I don't agree with every call a referee or an umpire makes, but you don't do that? If we ever get comfortable with that, this undermining of authority, we're in a terrible shape, worse than where we are. We've got people that look at our national constitution as maybe a suggestion, and in so many cases, they basically said, I know what it says, but here's what we want to do. And so we're going to disregard it, or we're going to act in ways that actually oppose what it says. Those are not good times for us. Those won't lead in a healthy direction, I'm convinced. We are seeing our religious rights being infringed upon. God is the ultimate authority, given in his word. So many people either blatantly and viciously, or at least in ignorance, saying, I don't care what has been normal or what has been traditional. We're going to rethink and restudy and in many cases overthrow all of those things. I wanted to give you a clear example of authority in the Bible. Clear example of authority. Be turning in your Old Testament to Numbers chapter 27. Numbers 27. If we can advance that one more time here, I think we'll be caught up. Maybe not. Don't tell me the clicker and the monitor both. There we go. Some of you, and I knew I'd get a chuckle or two out of this image there. When you think of authority, what do you think of? Are there some images that are enduring there? Sometimes we mock authority, and we look upon it like a lot of folks would look at old Barney there and say, you know what, that's just a symbol. In fact, wanted to be kind of jeered at and disrespected more than anything else. But there is an authority of God, and that comes from, among other things, his designated place in society, his will that, I've gone too far, his will that we respect what he's given to us. Let me go back just a moment there. Here's where we need to be. In Numbers 27, here is a clear, to me, one of the clearest in all the Bible, passages that advocate a line of authority God establishes here. God is speaking to Moses, who is about to go the way of all the earth. He's going to have the successor, a handpicked one by God, and that is Joshua. Watch how God does this, and how it involves not just Moses and Joshua, but all of Israel back then. The Lord said to Moses, "Take Joshua the son of Nun with you, a man in whom is the Spirit, and lay your hand on him. Set him before Eleazar the priest, and before all the congregation, and inaugurate him in their sight." I underscored this in my Bible. See if you would in yours. "You shall give some of your authority to him." Moses, if I could stop here, you're still in charge. You're going to give some of your authority. That implies, Moses, you have authority. Not because Moses ran for office and got elected. God says, I'm inferring it to you. It's yours by my right. But you're going to give some of that to him, that all the congregation of the children of Israel may be obedient. Moses, you're not going to live forever. By the way, Joshua's not either, but while he succeeds you, and because he has some of your authority, they are to be obedient to him. Anybody have any trouble understanding that? I don't. And yet, read along with me here. To underscore that, he shall stand before Eleazar the priest, who shall inquire before the Lord for him by the judgment of the Urim. At his word they shall go out, and at his word they shall come in. He and all the children of Israel with him, all the congregation. Joshua has authority, yes, at his word, either go or come. And so watch this. Moses, verse 22 there, Moses did as the Lord commanded him. Do you see respect for authority? Yes. God is the ultimate. He has it all. Moses, subservient, but in a position of leadership, listens. And then takes the next in command here, Joshua, and does all that God says to inaugurate him. No one in Israel should have had trouble understanding that chain of authority, but within this same book, earlier in fact, number 16, there's a guy named Korah, kind of the ringleader. He's got Dathan and Abiram and a guy named On there, and they stand up and say, you know what, Moses? We are Levites. We're from the same family as you are. We don't like the fact that we're not priests. And Moses, you and Aaron, you take too much upon yourself. You see, Moses didn't lobby for the office. God gave it to him. These guys are trying to say, Moses, you got no right being the leader here. We want to have some of your leadership. Isn't that interesting? We don't want you to have the authority. Why? Because we want the power. We are coveting the prestige that goes along with it. And so they ask a good question. Why do you do yourselves or take so much upon yourselves? Why do you think you're the leader of the whole congregation of Israel and you exalt yourself? By the way, Moses didn't do that. He's a very humble, very meek leader, doing what God wants him to do. But Moses turns it around on Korah and his followers and says, it's actually you who are taking too much upon yourselves. You've got no right to do this. Tell you what, Moses says, all of you get a censer, get your incense and your fire, and you come out tomorrow. He had 250 other leaders with him that are kind of bucking the authority of Moses. And let's see what God says about this. There's a reminder, God's the ultimate authority. Doesn't matter what I think, what your opinion is, or anything. God is the authority. Next day, Dathan and Abiram are their tents. They don't even want to show their faces, and yet they're still smacking Moses down about his authority. And Moses is angry. God is more angry about this whole turn of affairs. Shouldn't have ever happened. Chain of command firmly established. And so, when these men are standing at their tents with their families, Moses says, you know what? Here's the deal. If these men die a natural death, they're in the right. What they're saying is essentially true about undermining my authority. But if something unusual happens, let's say the ground opens up and swallows them right where they are, then you'll know that they were in the wrong. You know what happened that day? Earth opened up, swallowed them. All of them perished on that occasion. It is a serious thing to question, to come in judgment of God's authority and his his hand-picked leaders. You'd think the people would have got the message, that would have left an impression. But even after that, you got some folks that are complaining and whining about Moses and about how good it was back in Egypt, in slavery of all things. And God sends fire upon those folks, kills about 14,700. It is a serious thing. You don't trifle with God's true authority. Matters not how you feel about God and what he did there. He manifests the authority. Now, how does that play? Is God kind of unfair there? Oh, no. You see in that same book, you come to Numbers 20, and Moses, by the way, this is prior to that section we looked at, Numbers 27, about Joshua succeeding him. Moses, remember the occasion of striking the rock versus speaking to the rock? It's different than what God earlier had told him, but when Moses blatantly disobeys God, God says, you're not going into the promised land. You're not going to lead him in. Very clear, very, very short story there about that. And then in Deuteronomy 3, Moses says, God, hey, I've been thinking about this. Wonder if you've had an opportunity to rethink this punishment. I would really like to lead them in. God says, no, don't talk to me anymore about it. It's settled. Deuteronomy 34, last book, you find Moses dying there, having been able to see with his eyes the promised land, but not stepping a foot into it. As a punishment, as a consequence for his rebellion, personally against the authority of God. This is how serious all of this is. And so there are other examples of disrespect of the authority of God. You know what some of you are thinking, and we need to entertain this right now. Sometimes those in authority disrespect that role or that office. If you watch the news about James Blake being tackled as a supposed but a very wrong suspect in some crime or something done, I believe there are examples. They're probably limited. I don't think they're an everyday occurrence of either brutality or an overextension of a God-appointed authority. Sometimes it happens. We dare not say that all of them are bad or whatever, but yes, it happens. But listen to this in Proverbs 29:2. When the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. But when a wicked man rules, the people groan. Some people aren't just cut out to be leaders. They stink at it. They're terrible. They abuse that authority. And we talk about how that power corrupts and how that absolute power absolutely corrupts. That's true generally. It's not true evidently of God there. Let me give you another Old Testament example of those in authority abusing that authority. That is a warning as well as to those who are submissive and should be. Ahab and Jezebel, not famous but infamous for their deeds. Naboth has a vineyard next door to the king there. Ahab says, you know what, I'll pay you for it. I'll give you something better. It's right next to the palace here. It'd be great. Naboth says, don't want to sell it. It's family land. And Ahab is sulking and he's pouting and all that. Jezebel says, hey, you're the king. You are in charge. You're the authority. Let me handle this. Has a feast there. Scoundrels say bad things about Naboth. He's blasphemed God and the king. They take him out and stone him, and Ahab takes possession through Jezebel of this vineyard. God says, I saw every bit of that. That stung. I don't like that. That is not what I had in mind in appointing leaders, those who are rulers over others. That is an abuse of power. And Ahab and Jezebel paid for that eventually with their lives. Very inglorious end to them, if you know that story, don't you? On and on it goes. In 1 Corinthians 9:18, Paul says, I do not want to abuse my authority in the gospel. Authority can be abused. Paul didn't do that. It was his aim to do other than that, the abuse of it. You read about an interesting fella, not in a good way, in 3 John verses 9 and 10, Diotrephes. The Bible says he loved to have the preeminence among the brethren. He's kicking church folks out, not because they needed to be disfellowshipped or excommunicated. He's wielding his power as a heavy club. And John says, when I come there, I'm going to deal with that. That can't continue. He has no right to do it. Elders are reminded in a spiritual setting that they are not to be, in 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 3, lords over those entrusted to you. Be examples to the flock. Sometimes an elder or a group of elders will be intoxicated with the power that they think that office gives and do things harmful or hurtful either to an individual or to the flock. That is a warning. That is an abuse of that power that God gives there. I think that more often it is a disrespect that comes to those who are in authority. In Luke chapter 4, some of you are turning there, great, verses 5 through 7, here's the temptation of Jesus by the devil. Remember the three avenues. And the devil says something interesting to Jesus. I think Luke's the only one of the two accounts that records it. But he says, all this authority I give you, all the kingdoms, Jesus, they're yours by my gift. All this authority I will give you and their glory. This has been delivered to me. I think he told a whopper there. I don't think God granted that to him. I think he's speaking in a similar way that he did Adam and Eve there. I'll give it to whoever I wish, but you just bow down. But you know what he's doing? He's disrespecting the true authority that Jesus, the Son of God, had. Jesus didn't bite. Was not going to be seduced into listening to a lie like that. The devil is powerful. Friends, he's not the authority. Jesus was disrespected over and over. The Sermon on the Mount closes in Matthew 7, 28 and 29 with these words. So it was that when Jesus had ended these sayings, the people were astonished at his teaching. He taught them as one having authority, not as the scribes. And even with that, you see in Matthew 21, folks asking him a question. The religious leaders, by what authority are you doing these things? Who gave you this authority? Jesus turned it around on them, asking about John the Baptist and whether he was from heaven or from men. And when they realized the horns of the dilemma they were on, didn't answer, Jesus says, I'm not going to tell you about what authority I do these things. The ultimate, listen to me, the ultimate rejection of authority has already happened. When they delivered Jesus to be crucified, when they spat upon him, nailed nails into his body, watched him writhing in agony on the cross, that was the display of the ultimate rejection of authority. I wish I could tell you, now that Jesus is at the right hand of God in heaven, his authority is never undermined. People continue to try to degrade Jesus, to treat him in a way that is disrespectful. Friends, it's not going to work, and it's only going to reflect on the ones trying to do that than the true Son of God. But if Jesus had authority and they rejected it and repudiated it and questioned it, don't be surprised when folks today try to, in a spiritual vein, do that very same thing. Let me give you a couple of more freebies here. In Jude, verse 8, Jude is talking about, I'll give you 2 Peter 2 in a moment. These are kind of parallel passages. He's talking about those who invited the disfavor and the wrath of God. He says, among other things, they defile the flesh, they reject authority. Again, Jude 8, they reject authority, and they speak evil of dignitaries. 2 Peter 2:10, a little bit different, says they despise authority. And if I despise it, I'm probably going to reject it, right? He goes on to say they're not afraid to speak evil of dignitaries. I've got a third point. First one was that sometimes those in authority abuse it. Sometimes those not in authority abuse ones who are. But number 3, disrespecting authority is dangerous. You're playing with fire when you do it. Romans 13 that we had read to us earlier. You know, there are 3 times when Paul wrote about our submission to government. 3 times. 1 Timothy 2 has actually prayers and obedience as a prescription for a Christian to his leaders. Titus 3, 1 and 2, very similar. Be subject to rulers and authorities. Be submissive to them. Live as a good citizen, he might say to us. And then in Romans 13, by the way, Peter, 1 Peter 2, talks about honoring all people and loving the brotherhood, fearing God, and honoring the king. 5 times in Romans 13, you have reference to either powers, maybe in your translation, or authorities. Never does Paul in this passage say you need to undermine their authority. You need to ignore it. You need to rebel and buck it at every opportunity, but be subject to it. They're from God. They're appointed by God. If you resist them, you resist the ordinance of God. Do you want to be unafraid of the authority? Do what is good. You'll have praise from the same. I can't take it for granted that all young people have parents telling them how to treat those in authority, but since my girls are a little bit beyond the influence of my teaching, let me say to all young people here, in fact, all of us, don't resist authority. Don't resist civil authority. If you see blue lights in your rearview mirror and you're pulled over, whether you are under the limit or over the limit, you pull over and you be respectful. And you thank that officer for doing his job. Don't outrun them. Don't go and buy a gun and say, you know what, I got a ticket, I don't like it, I'm going to go shoot a cop. It's unbelievable to me that we got folks in the world today that think we're at the place where it will be a wonderful, wonderful change in society when we start killing off folks who are discharged with protecting us. Where is that going to lead? You see the riots and the looting and the anarchy that results. That is a resistance to authority, but never is working out in a good way. There isn't. I'm here today to remind us, we sing a beautiful song. I think all of us know it. Jesus loves the little children of the world. He loves the red and the yellow and the black and the white. And so today, red lives matter, and yellow lives matter, and black lives matter, and white lives matter, and blue lives matter. You know, it's a matter of everybody mattering. Isn't that great? I don't know what color your skin is or what shade or hue or tone. You matter. And even beyond your life mattering, let me tell you, more importantly, your soul matters. Everybody's soul matters. Little babies in the womb, that life and that soul matters. And those old folks in the nursing home, you matter. And those folks that are rich and poor matter. And those who are uneducated and educated matter. Everybody matters. Can we get that message out to folks? I don't want to elevate my race or my class or anything over anybody else's, because the ground is level at the foot of the cross. And so everybody matters. That is our message to the world. And the more we respect God and His plan and His perfection, the better off we will all be. I matter. Jesus has all authority. Let's close there with a reminder that I don't need to be disrespecting authority. I need to respect all of it as much as I possibly can and encourage others to as well. As Jesus closed, giving that great commission in Matthew's gospel, all authority, every bit of it, given to me in heaven and on earth, and you go therefore and you teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things that I've given you, and lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. Your life matters. Your soul matters. God matters. His Son matters. His gospel matters. Respond today in obedience to show the importance of your soul. Tell Him it matters, and eternity matters. And we are here to live for God faithfully. I encourage you to do that if you're not in a relationship with Him right now. Please respond while together we stand and sing.